All right. Hopefully you stuck with me. Can you actually see that? Okay. Again, let's say the wage is equal to $10 an hour. So good number that we can do. We'll just assume that I'm saying per hour. So let's say that is something along the lines of this. So that's $10 an hour, negative wage. So this is the slope of this is equal to negative 10. I'll just put negative 10 here. I'll just put 10 there just so you know exactly where I'm looking at. So the cool part of this is we're looking at optimization. So the more mathematical technical term we're looking at is we're looking for the point at which the slope of the budget constraint and the slope of the indifference curve, which we haven't drawn yet, are equal. And the only point that happens is when they are tangent to each other. In other words, that they are touching just at one singular point. So it's going to look something, depending obviously on their tastes and preferences. Like if it was a leisure lover, then they would have a more flatter graph and it would touch around here. But if they're a more labor lover, it would be flatter and touch somewhere around the same area. But again, we're just going to draw a general one and say that they're in the middle somewhere. So let's see if I can do this perfectly. Not bad, not bad. I'm usually pretty shitty at drawing these, so I'm happy with that. Let's just say it touched right here. So at this point, say they're working, well, I'll draw down here. Say they're working 8 hours a day. And I can't do the math in my head right now. That's embarrassing. 24. Alright, 16 hours of leisure. Alright, now that I feel sufficiently stupid, let's continue. Okay. Just gonna draw it out here. So if you work 8 hours a day, and you get $10 an hour, you made $80 per that day. Hopefully I have that one right. God, if I got that one wrong, I'd have to stop immediately. But let's say we've got it right here. So that's how much they would work. And that is their budget maximization. And we're going to use this point U for utility maximization. So again, a few technical things to look at is that we'll say utility maximizing point utility max is equal to, well, I should say, is achieved when the MRS, and sometimes in the book it's abbreviated as L for I, like labor for income. I talked to Pietrykowski, he doesn't really care about that, just if it's just MRS, that's fine, doesn't really matter. So the MRS, the marginal rate of substitution, which is just the slope of the indifference curve, is equal to the negative wage. Again, the slope of the budget constraint. That's when you maximize utilities. So this is very, very important. You can write down this equation, but it's, I don't know, I figured like it's kind of implicit now that we've been working with this. So other things to think about. One implication about this model is that it assumes that workers can negotiate to choose their optimal amount of work time. So say that their indifference curve met somewhere up here. Let's say they had like an indifference curve somewhere along these lines. Let's say I prime. And again, I'm not being too technical because we're not worrying about the math here. But now they're working, or 16 hours here, they're actually working like, say 18, and then, Jesus, what was that, 6 hours of leisure. So that means that they're working more. So every worker has the point to choose, I'm going to work 18 hours, leisure of 6, and that's it. Where we know in reality that's not really the case. There's a norm set by basically the unions back in, I think, the labor movement that just argued for the 40-hour work week, the 8-hour day, and that was it. So it's kind of weak in that regard. So the last thing, and this is the final part of the lecture, is thinking about the two effects of changes in hours worked. And we alluded to this a few lectures ago, which is the two effects of the income effect and the substitution effect. Hopefully you can see that well. Don't need this anymore. All right, so this is going to get a little technical. I just want to make sure that we have this correctly. So the income effect is change in hours worked given a change in income, and that effect has to be less than 0. Let me make sure you got that. So how we think about this is that the reason why this is the case, you can also think about it as your wage increases, your hours of work actually decreases. So you have more income, so you're going to work less hours. So another way of thinking about this is just you work negative hours. That's another way to think about it. So your hours worked goes up, your wage goes up, your hours worked goes down. So the theoretical idea is that as your income increases, because as your wage goes up, generally your income rises. But again, just thinking about it without changes of hours worked, as your income increases, you have more income, obviously. So the way to think about this is that as your income increases, the price of leisure diminishes. And this is something I should have mentioned a few other lectures before, but we assume also that leisure is a normal good, and that essentially means that as the price of it decreases, we consume more of it. So the price of leisure, because your income goes up, you really don't lose that much by consuming one more unit of leisure. So the price of it diminishes, so you would think that the demand for it, or I shouldn't say the demand for it, just naturally you consume more of it because the price goes down because it's a normal good. So that's kind of the intuition behind that. And then the substitution effect is written like this. So the change in hours worked followed by a change in wage, or given a change in wage. And that effect is greater than 0 or positive. That's one way to think of it. So basically this means that as your wage increases, your hours increase. So again, this 0 or this positive is all related to the hours worked. So when you think the hours goes down after a change in wage, it's a negative effect. If the wage goes up and your hours go up, that's a positive effect. So that's one way to think about it. And the intuition here, so give me one moment, I just want to make sure I didn't make a mistake. Okay. Yeah, it's this portion was a little confusing to me, so I'm just going to basically tell him what he said, or tell you what Pietrykowski said. Says that the price of leisure increases, which is a little different here because your wage increases. That means the price of leisure actually increases because of the opportunity cost. Because the opportunity cost is higher, that means, because I think a few lectures ago, I want to make sure I have it in here. Yeah, as you can see here, wages are the price of labor, but also the cost of leisure from an opportunity cost perspective. So anyways, you've got the wage increases, the price of leisure increases, and that's because it's a normal good because of the opportunity cost. So you've got two different explanations here for why, or I should say you have two different theoretical predictions for why the hours of work are going to change, or I should say how the hours of work are going to change. And the interesting thing that Pietrykowski left on is that there is no theoretical justification for either one of these dominating the other. So if you have an effect where you have a wage increase, and you have a wage increase and your hours go down, that means that you have a dominant income effect. Whereas if your wage increases and your hours also increase, that means that you actually have a dominant substitution effect. And not every person has the same thing. It's just in whatever case, for any individual, one of these effects are going to dominate one another. And the cool thing about it is that the only thing that shows it is empirical results. It has nothing to do with theory. It's all about the data and what it tells us. And again, we're going to go over more of this in detail. He actually went through this pretty quickly at the very end of class. We had 5 minutes or so. So he should probably go over this more in detail because I think I did a relatively shitty job of explaining these two. But I think that getting this and then having it reinforced by Professor Pietrykowski will really nail it down. So I think that's everything, and if I'm not mistaken, yeah, that's everything we have. That's all the notes. Let me know if you have any questions, and yeah, no problem.